the terrifying truth. Why Schopenhauer saw the world as a jail. What if I told you that everything you call life, your routines, your dreams, your relationships, your ambitions is not freedom, but a sentence? And that you're not living, but serving time in a prison so sophisticated, so all-encompassing, that most people never even realize they're locked inside. That's exactly what Arthur Schopenhauer believed. He didn't see the world as a playground or a stage or even a battlefield. He saw it as a jail. And not because of politics or poverty or injustice, though those certainly add layers to the suffering, but because of something far more universal and inescapable, the human condition itself. Your body, your desires, your constant striving, those are the bars. The terrifying truth is that the prison is you. Now, I know that sounds dramatic, but ask yourself this: how many of your actions are truly free? How often do you stop and ask, why do I want what I want? We wake up, we chase goals, we suffer when we don't get them, and we suffer again when we do, because we're afraid to lose them or they weren't what we expected. We are trapped in a cycle of craving and disappointment. Schopenhauer called this the will to life, a blind, irrational force that drives all living things not toward happiness, but toward endless repetition. The will doesn't care if you're fulfilled, it only cares that you keep moving, keep wanting, keep surviving. And so, like inmates pacing their cells, we keep going in circles, mistaking motion for freedom.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more topics you love.
Think about how your day begins. You wake up not because you're free to do so, but because your body demands it. You're hungry, so you eat. You feel lonely, so you seek company. You feel bored, so you distract yourself. Every action is a reaction not to freedom, but to lack, then to discomfort, to pain. Schopenhauer would say we don't act because we're free, but because we must. The will is like a warden inside us, whispering cravings into our minds and punishing us with suffering when we don't obey. And the worst part, even when we do obey, when we get what we want, the satisfaction is fleeting. The will only rests for a moment before demanding more. More pleasure, more success, more everything. So why did Schopenhauer use the metaphor of a jail? Because in jail you might have moments of sunlight, small pleasures, even friendships, but your basic condition doesn't change. You're still confined. And that's how he saw the human experience. We may laugh, love, create, and explore, but we do it all under the rule of the will. We can't escape our biology, our mortality, our limitations. Even our minds, the very tools we use to imagine freedom, are shaped by forces we didn't choose: genetics, upbringing, trauma, culture. We are prisoners who dream of escape, but don't realize that the walls are inside our own skin. Let me ask you something and really sit with this. Have you ever felt that your deepest desires weren't truly yours? That they were implanted in you by something you didn't control? That no matter how much you achieve, a part of you remains restless, unsatisfied, even tortured? That's the will at work. It's not evil. It's not personal. It's simply indifferent. And that indifference is what makes it terrifying. Because it means that suffering isn't an accident, it's baked into the system. Now, here's where Schopenhauer goes even deeper. He argues that this prison isn't just human, it's cosmic. The will isn't just in us, it's in everything. The tree growing toward the sun, the lion hunting prey, the insect crawling toward light. They're all expressions of the same blind force. The universe isn't rational, isn't moral, isn't purposeful. It's just striving, and we are its most self-aware victims. We're the only animals cursed with enough consciousness to realize we're trapped, but not enough to break free. So what do we do? How do we live knowing this? That's the question that hangs over all of Schopenhauer's work. And it's not a question we can avoid. Because once you see the bars, you can't unsee them. Once you realize that your suffering isn't just personal but structural, something shifts. The world doesn't become easier, but it becomes clearer. And sometimes, clarity is the first taste of real freedom. In the next part, we'll explore the most powerful and disturbing aspect of Schopenhauer's vision, the illusion of happiness. Why he believed that joy is not the opposite of suffering, but just a temporary pause in a much deeper pain. We'll dive into the paradox of pleasure, and why chasing it might be the very thing that keeps us imprisoned. The pleasure trap, why every joy is just a new chain. If you thought the prison metaphor was bleak, wait until you see what Schopenhauer says about happiness. Because here's the kicker, not only are we locked in a jail of craving and suffering, but even the moments we think are our breaks, the joys, the wins, and the good days are just illusions. Schopenhauer didn't believe that pleasure was the opposite of pain. He believed pleasure was simply the temporary absence of pain. It's not a real state in itself, it's just a pause, a momentary relief, like catching your breath between beatings. And once you understand that, your whole view of life starts to tilt. What if the things you're working for, the things you think will make you happy, are just slightly shinier chains? Let's break this down. Imagine you're starving. You eat, and it feels amazing. But Schopenhauer would say you're not actually feeling pleasure, you're just feeling the cessation of suffering. The pain of hunger is gone, so you experience a contrast. That contrast is what we call pleasure. But it's not real in itself. It's just the absence of something worse. And it will end. Quickly. Soon you'll be hungry again, or distracted, or dissatisfied. The will never lets you rest. It gives you just enough of a dopamine hit to keep you moving forward, like a carrot on a stick. You think you're getting closer to happiness, but you're just running deeper into the maze. Now think about your own life. Have you ever finally gotten what you wanted, a relationship, a raise, a dream trip, only to feel a strange, quiet letdown afterward? That eerie sense of, is this it? That's the pleasure trap. The will lets you taste fulfillment just long enough to keep you from quitting, only to snatch it away with the next craving. And the cycle continues. Desire, satisfaction, boredom. Desire, frustration, satisfaction, boredom. Over and over. This isn't a bug in the system. This is the system. And here's the most haunting part. Most of us are addicted to this cycle. We don't just chase pleasure, we need it to avoid facing the emptiness underneath. We use it as a distraction, a drug, a way to keep the deeper questions at bay. But Schopenhauer forces us to look straight into that abyss. He says, what if the whole structure of your life is built around avoiding pain, not achieving joy? What if all your goals, your dreams, even your relationships are just elaborate strategies to dull the sharp edge of existence? Let me ask you a brutal question. Would you still pursue your dreams if you knew they wouldn't make you happy? If you knew that the satisfaction would be brief, followed by another craving, and another, and another? Would you still chase money, love, fame, growth, if you saw them not as solutions, but as distractions? because that's the terrifying truth Schopenhauer places in front of us. The will is a master manipulator. It gives you just enough hope to keep you from giving up, but never enough fulfillment to let you rest. So where does that leave us? Are we doomed? Is life just a game we can't win, a trick we can't see through? Not exactly. Schopenhauer wasn't saying that life is only suffering. He was saying that chasing happiness guarantees suffering, that the pursuit itself is the problem, because it keeps you locked in the cell, pacing back and forth, believing that the next thing, the next job, the next thrill, the next success will be the thing that finally breaks you out. But it never is. It never can be, because the will doesn't want you free. It wants you moving, always. This is why Schopenhauer's message is both terrifying and liberating. Terrifying because it strips away the illusions we cling to, but liberating because it gives us permission to stop running, to stop chasing, to stop believing the lie that joy is just around the corner. If we can accept that, we might start to see life differently. We might start to ask deeper questions. Not how can I be happy, but how can I be free? Not what should I want next, but what happens if I want nothing at all? In the next part, we'll confront the most radical idea in Schopenhauer's thought, renunciation. The possibility that real freedom comes not from gaining more, but from surrendering, from stepping outside the will, from saying no not out of despair, but out of clarity. What does it mean to live without desire? And could that be the only way to escape the jail of life? Escaping the will, the radical power of saying no if everything we want is just another link in the chain, then the most rebellious act isn't to get more, it's to want less. This is where Schopenhauer parts ways with nearly every motivational speaker, self-help guru, and life coach you've ever heard. Because while the world screams at you to hustle, to grind, to chase your purpose, Schopenhauer quietly whispers something far more subversive: stop. Not because you've failed, but because you've finally seen the game for what it is. The will, that blind, endless force inside you pushing for more, is not your friend. It's a tyrant, and the only way to defeat a tyrant is to stop obeying. This idea, what Schopenhauer called the negation of the will, is one of the most misunderstood and radical concepts in all of philosophy. It doesn't mean giving up in a nihilistic, bitter way. It doesn't mean becoming numb or lifeless. In fact, it's the opposite. It means waking up for the first time, seeing the machine from the outside, and realizing that you don't have to play. You don't have to want, to chase, to suffer. You can simply stop. You can say no. And in that no, there is a kind of freedom that the yeses of pleasure never gave you. But how do we do that? How do we begin to step outside the will when the will is everything we've ever known? Schopenhauer believed it starts with awareness, really seeing that what we desire is not us, but that our cravings are not commands, that suffering is not a flaw in the system, but the very structure of it. And once we see that, we can begin to loosen our grip, not all at once, but slowly, gently, by withdrawing, by turning inward, by finding meaning not in acquisition, but in renunciation. This is why Schopenhauer was so drawn to asceticism, to mystics and monks and sages who chose lives of simplicity and silence, not because they hated life, but because they had seen through it. They had tasted the pleasures of the world and found them hollow. They weren't escaping pain, they were escaping the illusion that more pleasure would solve it. They were stepping out of the jail, not by breaking the bars, but by realizing the bars were made of desire, and desire can be let go. Let me ask you something you may never have asked yourself. What would your life look like if you stopped chasing? If you stopped needing your next goal to feel okay? If you didn't need to prove anything, buy anything, become anything? Would you vanish? Or would you finally appear, for the first time, as who you really are without the noise, the hunger, the constant push? This isn't about becoming a hermit or rejecting all joy. It's about choosing a different kind of joy, one that isn't dependent on outcomes, one that isn't hijacked by the will. You can still enjoy beauty, love, connection, but now you're not chasing them to fill a void. You're simply witnessing them, or participating in them, without needing them to fix you. Because you're no longer trying to be fixed. You're no longer trying to escape through acquisition. You're escaping through awareness. In a way, Schopenhauer's idea of saying no is the ultimate yes. It's a yes to life as it is, not as we want it to be. It's a yes to truth, to clarity, to freedom from the exhausting game of more. And that's not just philosophy. That's practical. In a world that constantly tells you to want more, to do more, to be more, there's something revolutionary about choosing less, about being content with nothing, not because you've settled, but because you've transcended. In the final part, we'll bring it all together. We'll ask the ultimate question: if life is a jail, and the will is our warden, then what does real liberation look like? Is there a way to live, not just survive, not just cope, but to transcend this strange, painful, beautiful sentence we've been given? The final cell: finding freedom in a world you can't escape. If the world truly is a jail, as Schopenhauer believed, then most of us are inmates pacing our cells, dreaming of escape while clinging to the very chains that keep us bound. But by now, you and I have walked through the corridors of this prison together. We've seen the walls of desire, the illusions of pleasure, the manipulations of the will. And now we arrive here, at the final cell, with the hardest truth, the one that doesn't offer a door, but something more subtle and perhaps more powerful, the realization that freedom isn't out there. It's in here, in how we see, how we respond, how we choose to be even when we can't choose our circumstances. Schopenhauer never promised salvation, but he didn't offer a utopia, a heaven, or a perfect fix. But he did offer vision. He taught us to see the machinery beneath our lives, not to escape it in a literal sense, but to live differently within it, to live from a place not of craving, but of clarity, to stop believing that the next thing will save us, to stop mistaking motion for meaning, to stop thinking that more is better, that happiness is the goal, that desire is life. And here's where the paradox hits. Once we stop resisting suffering, once we stop demanding that life be something it's not, we begin to soften. We become less reactive, less desperate. We start to feel the quiet spaces between the noise. We begin to notice the texture of being itself, not as a means to an end, but as something worth witnessing just for what it is. The small, unnoticed moments, the breath, the stillness, the strange beauty of existing at all. So let me ask you this: what if freedom isn't the absence of pain, but the absence of illusion? What if the most powerful thing you can do in this world isn't to conquer it, but to stop letting it conquer you? To stop letting it convince you that you're incomplete, that you're broken, that you need more to be enough? Schopenhauer's jail is real, but it's not made of stone or steel. It's made of thought, of desire, of unconscious compulsion. And the key isn't out there. It's not in success, or romance, or even philosophy. It's in the quiet refusal to keep playing the same game. It's in the deep, courageous act of saying, I see it now, and I don't need it anymore. You may never escape the world, but you can escape the illusion that it was ever meant to satisfy you. And in doing so, perhaps you'll find a freedom that no pleasure could ever match, the freedom to be at peace in the middle of the storm, to be still in a world that never stops moving, to be whole in a life that never stops wanting. And maybe that's the most terrifying truth of all. And yet, maybe it's also the most liberating.